Hello guys, my name is Lazaro and today we're going to be going over a medium LeetCode problem. This problem is called rotate image. You're given an n by n two-dimensional matrix representing an image. Rotate the image by 90 degrees clockwise. You have to rotate the image in place, which means you have to modify the input to the matrix directly. Do not allocate another 2D matrix to do the rotation. So as you can see right here in the example, this is the given matrix, and by rotating it 90 degrees clockwise, these 1, 2, 3 are now here on the side. The 3, 6, 9 is right here. So it's kind of like getting this block and just tipping it over and making it fall on this side. They want us to do this in place, so we have to work with this matrix we're given and modify it. We cannot create any other matrix. And this is just a bigger example down here. Alright, so let's get into the problem. So this is how the matrix looks. I'm doing the first example. It looks like this because it's two-dimensional, so it's an array of arrays. But I'm going to be writing it like this just to make things a little bit easier. So just keep in mind that this matrix up here is equal to, whoops, don't have my pen out. It's equal to this, or I just transferred it into that. All right. So before we start, I do want to write out the indexes. So this right here is row 0, this is row 1, and then this is row 2. Because remember, this is all inside one big matrix, which has one big array which has several arrays within it. So this is 0, this is 1, this is 2. And then within each array, it also has a 0, a 1, and a 2. But let me delete all of this before I write that down. 0, 1, and 2. Perfect. Now to solve this problem, there's actually a small trick that you have to do that will make everything so much simpler. So let's look at the answer. You can see here the answer is 741,852,963. If you look closely enough, you will see that this 5 never got moved, of course. But this 7 went from the bottom, this 7 in the bottom left went from the bottom to the bottom left to the top left. And then this 3 from the top right went from the top right to the top bottom. To the bottom right, I'm sorry. So it went from top right to bottom right. So basically what I'm getting at is before we want to actually start rotating everything, we want to reverse this array. Let's change it back. Let's do this. Okay. So we want to change this and reverse it. So reverse the matrix. And now it becomes 7, 8, 9, 4, 5, 6. This is odd, so this array right here, this set of numbers, just stay where it was. And then 1, 2, 3 in the bottom. 1, 2, 3. And we still have the same indexes, of course. But now our life did get much, much easier, because if we look back at the problem, you see how there's 7, 5, 3 diagonally going from top left to bottom right? We just accomplished that. So now all we really have to change is just these groups right here. And there's also a trick to this, but this time we actually do need to look at it, or do have to kind of change it up a little bit tougher than the other one. It's more than just reversing it. This 8 supposed to go where the 4 is. If we were to take a look at the location of the 8, we know its index, it's 0, 1. And the 4 is 1, 0. So basically backwards of the location of the 8. If we were to do this with a 9, it'll be 0, 2, and the 1 is 2, 0. And this pattern is repeated for 6 as well. 5 stays in the middle because 5 is just 1, 1. And then if you flip that, it's also 1, 1, so it stays right there. But for 6, it's 1, 2, and then 2, 1, which is this one. So these two flips. They flip. It's 9 flips, and these flip. So maybe it might help if I color code this. So this 8 is going to switch with the 4. This 1 is going to switch with the 9, or the 9 is going to switch with the 1, either way. Then, let me get a better color. Then the 6 with the 2, and of course this diagonal going from top left to bottom right just stays exactly where it is. So this is all we really need to accomplish. Now, something else I do want to point out is notice how when we're looking at the 8 or we're looking at the 9, where we're in this row, this 0 row right here, it's going to be switching with numbers below it. So it's going to manipulate these numbers in the bottom. The same thing when we're in row 1. When we're looking at 4, or we're looking at 5, or we're looking at 6. Well, not 5 in this case, of course. But when we're looking at 4, or... Well, not 4 either, because our arrow did get switched. But when we're looking at 6, there we go. It's also manipulating the numbers below it. So when we're looking at these rows, we know that we want to only look from where we're currently at, and then +1. The reason we're doing +1 is because that will take care of everything else. Because it'll go from this row, 1 + 1 is 2, so the row +1, and then everything else, to the length of the matrix. So let's see how that code will look. Let's first reverse the matrix. So I'm going to be writing pseudocode. Might look like Python, but basically the same thing. So it's totally fine. Should be easy enough for you guys to switch it over to your preferred language. So for I in range to the length of the matrix, you know what? Let me actually write better pseudocode. There we go. Matrix.length. And we actually want to do length divided by 2. The reason we want to do this is if we actually go all the way to the bottom of this matrix, we will eventually get rid of our work. So I switch this 1, 2, 3 to the bottom. So now it becomes this 7, 8, 9, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. Then I switch this 4, 5, 6 with itself, so it stays right there. Then I switch this 1, 2, 3 with this 7, 8, 9, which should get rid of all my work. So let's just do it to the half of the array, or of the matrix. That way we can only switch everything before the middle, so all of this, with everything after the middle, all of this. So there we go. We're dividing that by 2. Now we want to have a variable that as a temporary variable to hold the array at this current I index. So let's just call that temp. And let's make that equal to matrix at this I index. Now we want to do the switching. So the switching is going to be matrix of I is going to be equal to matrix of the length of the matrix minus I. Now I know for Python that this length, let's say if we have an array 1, 2, and 3, the length will give us 3, but the highest index is 2. So this would be an out of bounds error when our I is 0. So I'm not sure if this is for every language, but just keep that in mind when I'm doing the length. You know what? Let me just actually do the -1. There we go. I don't know if it's for every language. I'm not totally sure about that, but just keep that in mind. So we switched it. We switched the row at index I with the row at index matrix.length minus I minus 1. Now what we want to do is we want to also change the row that was at index matrix.length minus I minus 1. And we want to change that to whatever was in row index I, which since we changed that value, that's why we had to store in a temporary variable. So now we just make this equal to 10. And this whole for block right here is reversing the matrix. Now let's actually get into finding the solution, into flipping every other number. So flipping these 8s and the 9s and the 6 with the 4s and 1s and 2s. So now we want another for loop. So for I in the length of the matrix, now we want a nested for loop. Because remember, for all these numbers up here, let's say this goes on, let's say there's a 10 and an 11 right here, and let's say there's a 12 and a 13. We want to switch this 10 with that 12 and that 11 with that 13. So we want a nested for loop to kind of look at every single number that comes after this row, after the row we're currently on. So for J in matrix dot length, actually I would have to use a range here. So I'm just gonna write range of I plus 1 to the matrix dot length. Because remember, since we want to look at every single row after the one we're currently looking at, we need to do the I plus 1. Now we kind of want to do something similar we did in reversing the matrix. We want to hold it in temporary. I of j. And then switch it This switching right here that we're looking at is this switching of the index. Remember, this 8 was at 0, 1, but the one we want to switch it with, the 4, it's at 1, 0. So we're getting that 0, 1, and then we switching it by doing, instead of doing ij, we're doing ji, which will give us 1, 0, the 4. And now we want to do matrix of I of ji is equal to 10. And this is it. This is our whole solution right here. These two for loops. Well, 3 content nested one, but these 2 blocks. So now let's actually code it out. Let's see if it actually does work. So let's start with that. Let me make it a little bit better for you guys. So let's start with that first for loop. So for I in range, length of matrix divided by 2. Now let's create a temporary variable. Now let's switch them. Minus I minus 1. Then matrix at that length of matrix location. Then minus the I, then minus the 1 is equal to 10. So right here we should have already reversed our matrix. So now it's backwards, if you want to look at it that way. And now let's actually switch the other numbers. So for I in range, length of matrix, then for j in range of I plus 1, because we want to look at every row after the one we're currently on, to the length of matrix. Now here I'm writing length of matrix of I, but since in the problem it said it's a n by n, which means the number of rows is equal to the number of columns, and you don't really have to do this, but this is just, I'm just used to it. So now let's create that temporary variable again. Let's switch it. So we switch one number, now let's switch the other. Perfect. Now let's actually run the code. Oh, looks like I misspelled something. I misspelled matrix. Oh no, I misspelled it here. It's not matrix, it's matrix. There we go. Now let's run that code. Okay. Now let's actually submit it. And it works. Perfect. So if you guys enjoy this type of video, then make sure to join our Discord channel. It's be linked down below. We send out beginner and advanced problems, and we also do videos on each and every single one of those problems, both advanced and beginner, just in case people are struggling. So if that interests you, or you just want to become a better programmer, make sure to join our Discord channel. Other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed, and thank you for watching.